Sword Art Online Alicization Episode 7 is going to be skipping an entire chapter of the light novels featuring Kirito and Eugeo participating in a crucial tournament to be admitted into the Imperial Swordcraft Academy. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, and this is Sword Art Online Explained Episode 6.5 as it's titled by me, going over the entire cut chapter of Zakkaria. This is going to be slightly different than the usual explained videos I make here on my channel, since it's going to be more of a retelling of said chapter that the anime is skipping, with episode 7 titled Swordcraft Academy, and all the previous screenshots, episode trailer, as well as the synopsis completely ignores the contents of Zakkaria. So I thought I'd just go over the significant chapter that sets up various concepts of the human empire, including how sword skills are perceived by the Underworldians and the nobles in this world, as well as providing a variety of character development to both Eugeo and Kirito, and last but not least, introducing a mysterious observer character. As usual, if you'd rather experience this story not included in the anime by yourself, Amazon affiliate links for the Alicization novels will be in the description down below. This specific chapter is from the volume 10 of the novels, Alicization Running, and considering how much the anime is changing the contents of this specific book, aside from the fact that they are skipping an entire chapter, I do recommend giving it a go yourself. You won't be disappointed, but if you don't want to, I'll be covering the chapter in detail here in this video anyway, so I hope you enjoy. You're gonna have to excuse the lack of varied visuals, and that mainly has to do with, well, the anime is skipping the entire chapter and the light novels are not picture books. We only have 2 images for this chapter in the light novel, so I'll be using screenshots from previous episodes just for coloring the scene, aside from using the 2 images that we have from the light novels. So without further ado, we head to the northern town of Zakkaria. The town is the largest in the northern area of the North Empire and is found to the south of Rulid, about 2 days away from it in fact, for those traveling on foot. Being the largest town on the northern section of the North Empire, each year a sword fighting tournament is held in Zakkaria, and 2 winners of the East and West tournament blocks are granted permission to attend the Imperial Swordcraft Academy in the northern district of central capital Centauria. And this tournament in Zakkaria was the first goalpost in Kirito and Eugeo's journey to reach the Axiom Church Tower, where they believed Alice was being held. In fact, their complete plan consisted of going through this tournament to attend the Imperial Swordcraft Academy, and after their time as students, graduate as the top 2 ranking swordsmen to be allowed into another graduation tournament, the winner of which is granted access to the Axiom Church Tower. And based on this simple goal, the second part of Kirito and Eugeo's journey begins. It had almost been half a year since they first left the town of Rulid, heading to the south, and they were not alone. Well, they didn't know they weren't alone, but this entire chapter is narrated, or rather observed, from a mysterious entity following the duo, so we hear no internal monologues from both of the protagonists here. Currently known as the quote-unquote observer, had been tasked by its master to keep track on an abnormality in the system, a black-haired boy and his companion, 163 days before, just when they were leaving the town of Rulid. Its job was to observe and report back without interfering with anything in the progress, and the observer initially was not impressed. Aside from the black hair of the boy in a region where the hair colors tend to be much more bright, nothing seemed out of the ordinary with the teen, but in time, it had grown quite attached to the boys, who were constantly walking the fine line of breaching the Taboo Index much closer than any other Underworldian, so it had recognized why its master wanted to keep an eye out on the duo. Despite that the master had forbid the observer to intervene, during the cold breeze of the night, the observer decided to cover the boys in their sleep by pushing some hay on their bodies in the barn with some sacred arts, and returned to its usual hiding place, the shaggy black hair of the boy named Kirito. Next morning, the duo left the Valda farm they were staying at, bidding farewell to the family and their kids, Telin and Telur, and went on their way to Zakkaria, as the observer was wondering how the kids possessed such a high object control authority. However, on their way to the tournament venue, observer suddenly felt a huge shake and realized that Kirito was almost trampled by a horse going rogue. The reason why the horse had gone rogue was because it had been bit by a swamp fly that actually should not have existed so close to Zakkaria. But the kids decided not to dwell on this peculiar incident. They reached the venue and filled the admittance form, showing the letter by the Rulid elder Gasfut Suberg, proving that their calling was now man-at-arms, so they were allowed to participate in the tournament. Both the Sentinel as well as the Observer residing in Kirito's hair was surprised that both kids had written Aincrad style as their sword style on the entry form, a sword style that the Observer had never heard before in its life. It had thought if Kirito had created a brand new style on its own, but immediately turned the idea down, having seen the swordsmanship used by Kirito consisted of multiple secret forms, as skills were called in Underworld. The tournament consisted of 2 phases. After being separated into 2 blocks, East and West block via lottery, the participants first went into a demonstration phase of the tournament, where they showcased various skills back to back. This was not really to show their quote-unquote sword skills to the audience and the judges, but rather was a result of the way Underworldians perceived sword skills. In a perfect world where every bad thing was forbidden by the Taboo Index that nobody could breach, humans did not really need fighting techniques, so in time, sword skills had turned into more of a performance show, a quote-unquote sword dance so to say, than their primary purpose of being effective in fights. But after passing the demonstration round, the players were pitted against each other in elimination rounds. Not duels to death, of course, the Taboo Index did not allow that, so the winner in these tournament matches were concluded before any bloodshed. The first one who gained a first shot, as in who stopped just short of hitting the other in a major blow, was deemed the winner. However, the problem was, if Eugeo and Kirito were to land on the same block, that would mean even in the best case scenario only one of them would be able to proceed. And this also created a huge question in Kirito's head. He and Eugeo have been companions so far throughout their journey, but what would happen when the day would inevitably arrive where he may be forced to cross swords with Eugeo? The boy with blonde hair was much more natural at holding a sword for some reason than Kirito was, and was progressing rapidly. Maybe today Kirito would be able to come out on top, but what about tomorrow? Even Kirito did not know the answer to that. But the Observer was aware of the same issue as well, and it was quite impressed by the intuition of Kirito during their preparation time while they were waiting for the event to start. Kirito had caught one silent person to his eye. He had warned Eugeo to be careful against this person if they were to get matched, as he seemed to have a sneaky personality like Jink was, and assumed he would secretly attempt to sabotage his opponent if given the chance. Observer was surprised by the accuracy of the statement. It had access to the world data in a much more detailed manner than what was shown on the Stacia windows, and confirmed Kirito's assumptions through these data. The kid Kirito warned Eugeo about had a very similar personality stat to that of Jing. But it was now time for the lottery draw. Although it was forbidden to intervene, once again, the Observer was filled with an emotion that it was not very familiar with, similar to the previous night at the barn. It was the end of the road for the kids if they were to land in the same bracket. A sentinel brought the box filled with numbers in 2 different colors for 2 different blocks for the participants to grab one at random. Despite its master's instructions, the Observer jumped into the box to see the contents and provided both Kirito and Eugeo different colored numbers to ensure they would not land in the same bracket. But the Observer was still curious as to why Kirito had focused on that one person from before. It wanted to know the reasoning behind. It stayed a while in the box and waited for that shy-looking human unit to approach, and once he did, the Observer provided him a blue number as well, making sure he would get matched with Kirito if both kids continued successfully in their brackets. The Observer was quite unsettled at how much it had intervened already, but tried to reason with itself by claiming this entire process would make the job of observing the duo much more efficient. The Observer was only meddling with the draw to ensure it would be able to handle its task properly, or so it said. During the demonstration phase, the participants were given scores by the judges. The tournament had started with the speech of Kelgam Zakkaria, the noble liege lord of Zakkaria, and proceeded with the individual demonstrations where the participants would imitate the movements of certain skills manually by hand. While having participants from different regions, all the skills that were to be demonstrated were from the Zakkaria style, but it was no issue for Eugeo. Despite being extremely nervous, Eugeo had aced his demonstration not making a single mistake during his perfectly smooth flow of his movements. However, Kirito had other plans for his demonstration. Plans that would make Eugeo and the observer go crazy. This was the scene that showcased Kirito's lack of actual skills in swordsmanship. He wasn't a swordmaster, he had a very shoddy sword style in general, and so far he had been just brute forcing things without any elegance. But in a contest that judged you based on your technique, that was a no-go. However, Kirito's plan was to combat this. Each individual form took roughly around 10 seconds in normal, rather slow pace, and participants were to showcase 10 forms one after the other, making the complete demonstration take around 100 seconds. Normally, that is. And then, it was Kirito who stepped on the stage. He hastily drew his sword, surprising the judges as well as the audience, but he didn't care. In fact, that was all part of his plan. He followed this up by showcasing the forms one after the other in incredible speed, completing an entire 10-second sword form in around 2 seconds. The observer almost pulled Kirito's hair from where it was hiding, but promptly realized the intentions of the kid in black hair. While the forms were demonstrated in pieces of 10 seconds of flowing movements, the demonstrations were not judged on how fast the movement was. It was all about the flow, and there was no penalty for finishing early. On top of that, Kirito's technique was, as mentioned, quite shoddy, but showcasing them at such speed did not give the audience to judge the elegance of the movement and resulted in them to enjoy the showcase of power, something Underworldians never even saw in their lives due to how sword forms are perceived in this world. Kirito simply offered them a different kind of beauty to judge, hoping they would not be able to see the minute details of a form flow at such speeds. And to the observer's relief, once the results were announced, along with Eugeo, Kirito had gained access to the next round. Both kids proceeded without any issues during their duels until Kirito's third round came up. Two names were called, Kirito and Eugeo Zakkaria, the son of the Zakkaria nobility Kelgam Zakkaria, the silent-looking kid that Kirito had warned Eugeo about. The observer recognized that Kirito was worried, but it wasn't sure what he was worried about. The observer was aware that under certain circumstances, high confidence or sheer willpower could affect the world in certain ways, but there was no way Kirito knew this. But with the starting sound, Eugeo moved instantly, surprising the crowd. In formality, both participants were to take stances and more or less participate in a quote-unquote fight, very reminiscent of a choreography, but it wasn't written in the rules to do so, much less forbidden, so Eugeo's start was all fair game. When both clashed swords, however, Kirito figured something out. Eugeo was reeking of something called Tanglewine, and the only use of Tanglewine was to paralyze poisonous bugs. The bugs, much like the one bit the horse in the morning, almost causing Kirito to be trampled by it in the town. Kirito had already made the connection. While their swords were still locked, Kirito asked if it was him who let loose a swampfly in Zakkaria, and the kid responded. Does the Taboo Index or Imperial Law forbid releasing harmless bugs into the air? Kirito knew the answer, there was no such rule against it. Despite Eugeo had the intention of harming people by releasing the fly for it to bite the horse, causing it to go berserk, the Taboo Index or the Imperial Law had not caused a red eye on him, simply because it wasn't forbidden to release a harmless bug. The kid had interpreted the rules in a way that allowed him to potentially kill people without breaching any barriers. And this was the second instance in the series so far where it was time to ask the questions again. Is the Taboo Index really just? And justice according to whom? Kirito tried pushing him back, promising Eugeo that he would not lose against someone who was using such cheap tricks, but his training sword given to him by the tournament officials creaked instead. Kirito was confused, but the observer just had realized the cause. Kirito's sword was the usual rank 10 sword provided to everyone participating. However, Eugeo was holding a rank 15 sword in his hand. Kirito promptly realized the implication as well and looked back at Eugeo, who was now pushing forward with his weight. Eugeo said that he had not done anything against the rules here either. The rules simply stated that participants were to use swords provided by the officials. It wasn't his fault that a rank 15 sword was accidentally included in the bunch, provided by said officials, and he was, once again, correct. Instead of pulling back, Kirito collapsed and slid under Egon's legs to the opposite side to get a breather. However, the observer sensed danger. It knew that even nobles were not intentionally capable of breaking the Taboo Index and thus would not be able to harm Kirito, but he sensed Egon was preparing for a quote-unquote accident to happen, not directly by his hand, but through convoluted means, much like the horse incident that very same morning. Egon started using a certain sword form, a form that the observer recognized to be a sword skill from the blue glow of Egon's sword, the Zakkaria style secret technique, Blue Wind Slash. And the observer knew that the sword skills were automated actions that Egon would not be able to stop before hitting Kirito. And thus, the observer also knew there was only one way to stop Egon in this case, for Kirito to drop his sword and stay weaponless against him, which would trigger the Taboo Index and stop Egon from even attacking Kirito. It wanted to tell Kirito to do that, but it heard something. Very silently, Kirito murmured in a way that nobody outside of his immediate vicinity could hear. Something only the observer could hear. Secret technique, huh? Much to the surprise and sanity of the observer, Kirito tightened his grip on his sword. Egon's sword skill unleashed and the observer was tempted to interfere. It was too late for sacred arts, so it was about to jump down and reveal his true form to save Kirito's life, completely going against the orders it has been provided by its master. But the observer saw something. Kirito lunged forward with his sword glowing purple. His sword moved both left and right at the same time, and with a loud clash of swords, a silver light shone up into the sky. Egon stood still, completely shocked as to what he had just experienced, but the observer had seen enough to understand what had just happened. Kirito's voice broke the silence. That's the two-part Aincrad style attack, Snakebite. The silver light shining in the sky, the broken tip of Egon's Zakkaria sword landed on the ground. The observer's thoughts were very clear. It needed to see Kirito and Eugeo's journey to its end. The observer's thoughts were very clear. It needed to see Kirito and Eugeo's journey to the end. Surely that it would lead it to... That's as far as it goes in terms of the thoughts of the observer and the peculiar human unit that it deemed as quote-unquote noteworthy as Master or the Great One. As to who they are or who the observer is, you will need to wait a bit more, but this brings us to the end of Volume 10, Chapter 3, the Zakkaria Tournament, and it will lead you safely into Episode 7 of the anime, titled Swordcraft Academy. I hope you enjoyed this summary of the skipped chapter of Zakkaria, and I look forward to seeing you all on Saturday in my Episode 7 Explained video. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be there for the premiere event, of course. As I mentioned, you can find the links to Alicization Light Novels in the description, and if you appreciate the effort I put in these videos, Patreon is a great way of supporting my channel. Huge thanks to my Patreons as usual, and I'll see you all this Saturday. Take care.